everyone. Welcome to the March edition of Mixed Media Menagerie. So the first thing I did was open this fun little package that Erin left on my doorstep. She included some amazing little goodies which started my creative wheels turning as to how I was going to incorporate our little requirements this month, which included fluorescent, glass bead gel, deli paper, and using a flower stencil. And you can see she included a fun little array of bits and pieces here, and so I used these as inspiration. The next thing I did was grab my supplies to fulfill the requirements, so to speak, that we had this month. I grabbed a bunch of flower stencils, my journal, the deli paper, and a bunch of different fluorescent colors. My goal was to, if possible, only use fluorescents, and you'll see that I do accomplish that as I begin to work on my pages next. So I actually skipped the next spread that was up in my journal. It was one with a denim page in between, because I noticed that the one after was the page or the spread in between the two signatures of the journal, and I thought this was going to be absolutely perfect for this vision I had in my mind of what I wanted to do. Because this was the two signatures in between, I kind of spread them apart, which kind of created a gap, and I decided to use a little bit of masking tape to just help the integrity of the pages and make sure that all of my mediums didn't go between. I do buy an acid-free masking tape to do this with, and once in a while I do use it to help with the integrity of my pages. So the first thing I did was grab the wrapping paper that Erin had created for my first layer after I had gessoed and the gesso completely dried. I wanted this to be my first layer. She included this deli paper full of wonderful fluorescent colors, which is going to create the perfect foundation for my idea. So now that I have this wonderful deli paper put on my journal pages using the matte medium, I wanted to kind of unite them with some grungy spray painted words, and this is a stencil by iStencils, a Donna Downey designed one, and it's one of my favorites. I love the font, and so I spray painted through the stencil and also flipped it around for the inverse to create backwards words and forwards words to kind of unite those pages. Now I'm going to clean it off on some deli paper and also spray it again on some deli paper, because I'm planning on using this in the future. One thing we needed to use was deli paper, so I already did with Erin's, but I also wanted to include some more. So I'm creating some front and reverse of this stencil because, again, I wanted to use it in my future layers. Now I'm adding some more layers with this cool printed tissue paper that Erin included. I love using things like deli paper and tissue paper because the color shows through. So this is going to allow those yummy layers of fluorescent that I already had, but create some more texture with the words and numbers. Before I go on, I want to go back just a minute to the spray paint that I used. I'm going to use some again in a minute, and people often ask me about this spray paint, and no, it does not smell, and yes, I use it inside. I love it, and I highly recommend it. Now I'm going to add some gesso to kind of block some of those funny black splatters, and then I found that some of the deli paper that Erin had included had just a little bit too much black. I wanted to push some of that back so that I include some more fluorescent colors coming up. After using a baby wipe from over gessoing a little bit and allowing the gesso to dry, now I'm adding a little bit more fluorescent colors. I'm just using these liquid inks. They're acrylic inks by FW, and I'm just adding droplets all over my page of each color individually. I had to shake them up pretty good, which is why they're funny and sideways on my table, and I'm just adding the drops, and in a minute I'm going to pick up my paintbrush and spread those drops around a little bit. After they're spread, I'm going to add some more drops and kind of go back and forth here, adding some more fluorescent layers to my background. Alright, so bright, bold, fluorescent colors accomplished, and now I'm going to add my flower stencil. So I had picked out a ton of flower stencils in the beginning, but ultimately decided to use this big one, again by iStencils. It's a Donna Downey designed one, and I think it's called Marigold, and I used the marigold flower to also to influence the colors that I choose in a minute. I'm just tracing around the inside of it with a Stabilo so that I can paint it in a minute, and I'm also, as you can see on the right, activated that Stabilo with just some water. I decided to have one big flower on the right and two partial flowers on the left. So now I'm activating that left side, and I'm noticing that as I activate it, it's not as noticeable because this side is kind of busy. And so I added just some gesso to my activation so I could see the inside of these flower petals better. And also it's going to add a little bit of, I don't know what the right word is. Gesso is great to help your paint stand out. And so it's also going to allow my paint to stand out just a little bit more on top of this messy layers. Alright, so my stencils are traced, my Stabilo's activated, you can see all my petals, and I'm going to start coloring these flowers in. So I spent a lot of time coloring in my flowers. I edited out a lot of it, so you're going to see me flip and go from process to process here, color to color, and I'll just explain a little bit what I'm doing while you watch it. So I started off thinking I was going to do kind of an ombre effect on this and found out it wasn't working kind of how I envisioned and wanted to go maybe for a little bit more of a blendy effect. And so I'm using a lighter orange and a darker red, I think fluorescent color. You can see it's fluorescent orange yellow there to the right, and I think the other one's a fluorescent red maybe. You'll see all the colors were in the beginning of the video. And I'm just doing a little painterly look to this flower using these two colors. As I continue, I notice that the colors maybe don't stand out enough, so in the end I'm also going to add a little bit of pink and yellow to this flower eventually. So I also had to pick up my stencil here because I couldn't see my outlines of this petal. So feel free again to pick up your stencil and use it, because even though you've traced them, you might need to pick it up again. So I'm adding the orange here to try to make this flower blendy, and I'm going to add yellow in the middle. So on all three of these flowers, I basically pick a main color, kind of a blendy color, and then I added two maybe other colors with them. In the center, I'm going to do the same. I pick a totally opposite color, and then I'm going to add another color or two in them. And here's where I'm adding the yellow to the flowers to make them pop a little bit more, add another dimension to them. And eventually I do add a little pink to this flower as well. So when I traced the flower originally, I didn't trace the center circles. I just figured I'd add those with my own paintbrush. I'm building layers here in the center because my idea with the glass bead gel is to add it to the center. So that's one reason I chose the big flower stencil, because I wanted to have a fun center full of that glass bead gel. And you're going to be able to see those spots behind the glass bead gel because it will dry clear, and you'll see that in a few minutes down the road. Now I'm starting my second color here, second flower here with my second color. I chose pink, the fluorescent pink is this one, and I'm blending it with the fluorescent, I think it's magenta, to create the two-tone blendy effect. And I'm also adding some of that orange in there. I think I might add another color in this one, I don't remember. Again, I ended up adding 2, 3, 4 colors to these flowers, even though I used a lot of the same colors because I applied them differently with different base colors. The flowers are going to all look different but yet cohesive because they use the same colors. And as I mentioned, I did add a little bit of pink to that first flower, and here I am adding just a little bit of pink for some more pop. This center is orange. I'm going to add polka dots to it again, just like in the other ones. And my base layer for the third flower is this fluorescent yellow. I think it's actually fluorescent chartreuse, maybe? Golden has some new fluorescents out. My original fluorescents are the ones that I'm using now in the kind of pot containers, and then the newest ones I have are in the tubes. Originally, Golden didn't have the tubes in the fluorescent colors. You had to get them in these pot containers, but they do have several sizes now, including the tubes, which are a lot nicer, I think, because the paint doesn't dry out as easily. And I will be replacing, you see my pink is getting a little empty there. I'll be replacing those with the tubes probably. And here I am adding the orange to the yellow. This is the second color I chose. I added the yellow polka dots a minute ago on the second flower too. Just blending the colors here again to create that cohesive look, adding some yellow as my third pop of color, and in a minute, there it is. I'm going to start the center. This center is going to be pink and with a little orange added to it. So I decided that I needed a little bit more pop of color, a little bit more dimension in these centers. Like I said, I'm building some layers here that are going to hopefully look cool under the glass bead gel. So I grabbed the end of my paintbrush to add another dot in the center of those dots. It went from yellow to orange and then orange to pink, and just layered the dots and colors on in the center of my flowers. So my flowers are almost done. I still have to add another layer of dots to a couple of them. I'm waiting for that first layer of dots to dry, and while I wait, I'm going to add some black gesso around these flowers. You could also use black paint. I like black gesso because it's matte. Golden does have a new matte paint line that I haven't tried yet, but I am excited to try it eventually. Until then, I'm using black gesso again because I like that matte nature of it and how it spreads. So I'm going to start off with the black gesso pretty much like at full strength towards the center of the flower, and then as I get to the end of the flower, I kind of fade it out a little bit with water, so it doesn't abruptly stop but kind of looks like a natural fading process on the page. And I'm just following these I don't know, tunnels, channels, lines in between the petals and filling them with the black gesso. And I will continue the same process on all three flowers. So I continue to feather out that gesso just a little bit more to make the flower look a little bit more natural on the page, and allow it to kind of, eventually that shadowing or the watery down gesso will blend into the other flowers to make them all look cohesive. So I'm finishing up here on my last flower, same exact process, adding the gesso, feathering it out with a little bit of water at the end, and then I'll eventually kind of allow that feathering or that watered down gesso to meet the other two flowers so it looks like one cohesive pattern. And for some reason, this whole process didn't tape. You just got that tiny bit, but I did add yellow onto that last flower. So now I'm using the white spray paint. This is the first time I've used white spray paint. I thought it would be fun to try. In that black envelope that Erin included, I just knew I needed to spray white on it. So I grabbed that large stencil again to spray the white on the envelope. Hindsight, as they say, is 20/20, and I did spray that spray paint just a little bit too close. It got a little goopy. It didn't get as good of a spray as I had wanted. And I did want the inverse to be on the back of that envelope, but I couldn't really press down the envelope, so I'm using a little pencil there to press down and try to get the back of it on. Next, I wanted to include at least one of those pieces of paper that Erin had included. I thought this one matched my flowers the best and decided to just trace a couple petals out with my pencil and add those to the flowers so that a couple of the petals are going to be in paper instead of paint. The next thing I'm doing now that my envelope is dry is I'm adding it to my book as a little tip in. I'm tipping it in with some washi tape. Erin had some washi tape on the paper, but it just wasn't enough, so I grabbed some of my own washi tape and I'm putting it in the front and the back of the envelope to create a little flap, and then I'm going to secure it with matte medium just to make sure that it is absolutely secure and doesn't fall out of my book. So I have no idea why I didn't adhere these down earlier when I created them, but I never stuck them to the page, so now I'm adding those little paper petals to my page with a little matte medium on the front and the back. And then I decided I needed just one more petal, so I'm creating one more, cutting it out, and sticking it down on my journal page. So I really thought those petals were fun, and I added some more petals to the envelope with that shiny, I forget what it's called. It's not iridescent. You'll have to leave me a comment below and remind me what it's called. I can't remember. That shiny paper. I created some petals with it as well, and I had to stick that down with a heavier gel medium because the paper was a little bit thicker. And then as I was looking back on those petals, they kind of didn't blend in enough because when I cut them out, the edges of the paper was white. So now I'm adding just a little bit more black gesso around those petals to grunge them up so they match my page and blend in a little bit better. So now I'm adding the glass bead gel. It's the end of the day and I needed this glass bead gel to dry overnight so I could continue to work on my page. Glass bead gel is a clear medium, and so as it's going on white here, it will not dry white. It's like a gel medium kind of medium. It's not overly sticky, but it has little clear glass beads inside it, which is why it's called glass bead gel. And so we had to use glass bead gel this month, and I just spread it generously in each of my flower centers using a paintbrush so I could very gently get it around the flower so it completely covered it. So I'm spreading this out at night so that the next day when I wake up, I can come back and it will be completely dry and, as you can see, clear. This is the next day and the glass bead gel is completely clear on my flower centers. The camera doesn't pick it up very well, but it is there. And then I decided that I needed some color on this flap. I was originally going for the black and white. I wanted it to kind of blend in with the fluorescent one behind and kind of look like half color, half black and white flower, but I needed colors. So I grabbed those fluorescents and just filled in a few of the circles on the center of the flower. And now I'm picking up that deli paper that I made earlier with the stencil, the reverse, and the normal way, I guess. I'm going to just adhere pieces of it to this flower stencil with matte medium front and back and on the front and the back of the envelope. Basically, I'm just trying to make the envelope look like it matches the rest of the spread. So adding these words to the flower on the front and the back allows it to blend in a little bit more with the journal pages. Alright, so here's where I had to get a little creative. Erin included these letters, and they weren't all the letters of the alphabet. And thankfully, S was one of the letters on my sheet because I don't know how I would have made an S, but I used the letters that were included and cut them apart to spell spring. The theme of our pages this month was supposed to be spring, and I thought, what better way, besides the spring flowers, is to write spring with these cool fluorescent letters that she gave us. They're actually kind of rough, so they kind of match the glass bead gel, which was really cool. But I had to use part of the S for the P. I had to cut up a bunch of letters for the G, and it actually worked out. I got creative enough. And then again, like those petals, I decided it stood out just a little bit too much. It wasn't messy and grungy enough as my pages, so I added a little bit of the black gesso to the letters. And then I also splattered a little bit of it on the front to kind of bridge the gap between the fun background and the flowers. And then I got a little happy here with the gesso, and I had to wipe some of it off, which I like because it made the gesso a little bit more grungy on those letters. Again, they're rough like the glass bead gel, so it was picking up that gesso. Alright, so here is why I was super excited that this is the center spread of my journal, because I'm going to create a little bookmark with the yarn and the cool little fuzzy beads, I guess, that Erin included. I actually had no idea how I could use these on my journal page, and I'm really excited to see how Erin or Laura used them. And I decided I couldn't really use them on the page, so I'm going to create a little bookmark with them. Since I couldn't string the yarn directly through them, it was a little too thick, I created a little, you know how shoelaces have that hard end? I created a little end with masking tape and strung those beads through, and then I used one of the flowers, the crocheted or knitted, I guess they're crocheted flowers on the end as well with some of that yarn. Now that I have those little fuzzy beads strung on my yarn, I'm going to create this little bookmark in my art journal. I actually added a little bit more masking tape. I don't know if you can see it on camera, to the end of the yarn so it would be heavy, and I'm just dropping it down the back of my journal, stringing it around, dropping it down again. There'll be two strings on the left of the envelope and two on the right, which you'll see in a minute, and then I just am going to tie it on the top. So I'm using the little beads and using the little yarn there to create a little bookmark in the center of my journal. So when I tied it off, I had another string here, and I hadn't intended on having it a double bookmark, but I thought, hey, I have another little flower, so I just threaded another flower on the end of the string that was left and made this a double little bookmark on the for my journal. So I didn't mention it before, but when I tied off the thread or the string yarn on the other one, I used a little bit of Dina Wakley's heavy, there it is, heavy gel medium, just to maybe increase the integrity of this a little bit, to allow the yarn not to fray and hopefully keep those little beads and flowers on the yarn. And there you have it. There's my little cute little bookmark that's now going to hang on the outside of my journal using my supplies from this month's Mixed Media Menagerie in my Mixed Media Menagerie journal. A few more steps here. On one of my last steps, I'm using some of these rub-ons to add some numbers. I love the text behind these flowers, and there's some big bold black, in the front from the gesso, but I wanted to add a little bit more big bold black to the flowers themselves, so I used a little bit of rub-ons to add some numbers. And then I saw this little piece of paper that Erin had included and thought, I should stick an envelope liner in. This is going to make the envelope a little bit stronger and add a little something fun when you open the envelope. So I'm lining the envelope with one of these pieces of paper. And then I'm just going to stick these little cutouts that she included. I thought they were so cute, but I didn't know how to use them on my page and wanted something in my envelope. So I'm going to grab that little heart and those little swirls right there and put them in my envelope for a little surprise. And that's it. My big, bold, fluorescent, huge flowered, spring-themed, tons of fluorescent journal page with my little cute little bookmark that is so much fun. I want to thank you guys again for following along with us on our Mixed Media Menagerie Challenge. This month you have from today until the weekend to post what you can create with these supplies. We know that you won't have all the exact ones, but do your best, and we would love for you to play along with us. We will draw a winner to receive next month's pack of supplies, which also includes a set of paint markers from our sponsor. So you can read more about that below and check Instagram for more information. But we are so excited to have a sponsor for next month's Mixed Media Menagerie. I want to thank you guys again so much for watching. Make sure you check at the end to see how Laura and Erin use these same supplies to create a spring themed art journal page with fluorescents, a flower stencil, glass bead gel, and deli paper, plus the supplies that Erin gave us. And with that, I want to wish you all a very happy spring. Please play along with us using this hashtag Mixed Media Menagerie.